Recently, I turned 15 Yu-Gi-Oh cards into Magic the Gathering cards and people had a lot to say about it. Some loved my ideas while others had some valid critiques. Here's my attempt to do that all over again with some brand new cards. Let's see what 15 more Yu-Gi-Oh cards would look like in Magic the Gathering. Since we started off with Blue Eyes White Dragon last time, it's only fair we begin this video with Red Eyes Black Dragon. This is a level 7 Dark Dragon with 2,400 attack and 2,000 defense. Joey Wheeler won this card from Rex Raptor way back in Duelist Kingdom, and it's been one of his most iconic monsters ever since. In Magic the Gathering, Red Eyes Black Dragon would cost 4 generic mana, 1 black and 1 red, naturally. It would be a 6/5 with flying and no other special abilities because this is a vanilla monster after all. Red Eyes Black Dragon is a classic Yu-Gi-Oh card from the days when battle traps were a major part of the meta. And what battle trap is more memorable than the board-clearing Mirror Force? This trap card destroys all attack position monsters on your opponent's side of the field when they declare an attack. Since Magic the Gathering doesn't have static attack and defense positions like Yu-Gi-Oh, this effect needs a little tweaking. Mirror Force would be an instant costing 3 generic and 2 white mana. Destroy all attacking creatures target player controls. Pretty close to the original effect, right? Harpie's Feather Duster might be a bit more complicated to translate into Magic's rule set. This spell card destroys all spells and traps your opponent controls. In Yu-Gi-Oh, spells and traps can function like sorceries or instants, but if they're face down or continuous face up cards, they're essentially permanents. Not so in MTG. How would this spell work in a game when sorceries and instants never actually hit the battlefield? It'll have to do the next best thing. Harpie's Feather Duster would be a sorcery for 2 generic, 2 white, and 2 green mana. Destroy all non-creature, non-land permanents target opponent controls. Artifact and enchantment removal are notoriously green and white anyway, and I felt that Harpies, being winged beast monsters, would probably be closest to green and white mana as well. These 3 cards all hail from the OG era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And are pretty instantly recognizable, but there's a certain monster from that same era that might not be as famous, an illusion wall with a unique effect. No, not illusionary wall, but wall of illusion. This monster is a dark fiend with 1,000 attack and 1850 defense. Its effect reads, if this card is attacked by a monster, after damage calculation, return that monster to the hand. As you probably know, in Yu-Gi-Oh, monsters declare individual targeted attacks on other monsters, while in Magic the Gathering, a set of creatures all attack simultaneously while the defending player chooses blockers. Not to worry though, I think I have a solution that will make this effect work. Rather than being dark, Wall of Illusion would be a wall costing 2 generic and 1 blue to summon. It would be a 2/5 with Defender and Recoil. A creature with Defender, of course, cannot attack. Recoil is a keyword ability somewhat similar to Deathtouch that removes a creature from the battlefield due to combat. However, Deathtouch destroys any creature that's dealt any amount of damage by a creature with Deathtouch. When a creature with Recoil blocks, the blocked creature is returned to its owner's hand after combat. In case it wasn't already obvious, Recoil is a keyword ability I completely made up, inspired by blue spells returning permanents to the hand. I think it raises some interesting possibilities for MTG creature design. What do you think? Would this open a can of worms, or would this keyword be a viable addition to the game? While you think about that, let's look at Infinite Impermanence, a relatively recent addition to Yu-Gi-Oh! There are 3 important components to this card. First, it negates the effects of one of your opponent's face-up monsters until end of turn. If this card was set, you can also negate all other spell and trap effects in the same column as this card. And finally, if you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. Instants are very common in Magic, but hand traps are historically pretty rare and powerful in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is why this versatile card was so impactful to the meta when it debuted. Turning off the effects of a creature is nothing special in Magic. You can do that for a measly 1 blue mana with something like Witness Protection, and it stays that way. But that's not the only effect of Infinite Impermanence. How do we adapt the rest? As you may know, columns aren't a thing in Magic, and typically cards don't exist on the battlefield face down, aside from creatures sometimes. We'll have to get creative and try to emulate the spirit of the card in a game with totally different rules and mechanics. The MTG version of Infinite Impermanence would be an instant costing 2 blue mana. If you control no non-land permanents, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Target creature your opponent controls loses all abilities until end of turn. If you paid the spell's mana cost, target non-creature permanent your opponent controls also loses all abilities until end of turn. In Yu-Gi-Oh, activating a trap card from your hand is super busted, and as far as I know, there are only 7 traps in the game that can do so. The cost of a Yu-Gi-Oh trap card is usually setting it face down and waiting to use it the next turn. So I wanted to give Infinite Impermanence a similarly busted, cost-free contingency in Magic. Those were a lot of words. For a bit of a palate cleanser, let's bring our boy Celtic Guardian into the game where he should feel right at home. Fun fact, the Japanese name for this monster is Elf Swordsman, so of course he'd be an elf in Magic. Was there ever any doubt? I mean, look at those ears. Celtic Guardian would cost 2 generic and 1 green and would have 3 power and 2 toughness. Enough said. Celtic Guardian makes for a nostalgic creature, but he's not very strong on his own. He would probably need a bit of a power boost thanks to a card like Axe of Despair. Called Demon's Axe in Japanese, this equip spell boosts a monster's attack by 1000. When it goes from the field to the graveyard, you can tribute a monster and put Axe of Despair back on the top of your deck. For reference, in Yu-Gi-Oh, when a monster equipped with an equipped spell card is destroyed, both cards go to the graveyard, so this facet of Axe of Despair might be more relevant in Yu-Gi-Oh. In Magic, Axe of Despair would cost 1 generic and 1 black with an equip cost of 2 generic. Axe of Despair grants +3/+0 to the equipped creature. When Axe of Despair leaves the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature you control. If you do, put Axe of Despair on top of your library. While we're on the subject of artifacts, I realized I haven't adapted any machine-type monsters from Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's change that with Bowganian. Most of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards first appeared in the Battle City arc of the original anime, and many of those cards first belonged to Merrick. I have fond memories of playing Bowganian against friends in casual duels, only to be stopped because Bowganian's 600 burn damage each turn isn't very good. But how good of a card would it be in Magic? As an artifact creature, construct of course, Bowganian would cost 2 generic and 1 black for a 3/2. At the start of each opponent's upkeep, that opponent loses 2 life. Any ideas of how to exploit this ability, or is Bowganian equally bad in MTG? If we're talking about fan-favorite cards that first belonged to Merrick, I should mention again that Slifer is my favorite Egyptian god. Sure, Yugi summoning him in a bunch of duels in the anime and even in the first movie was cool and all, but Slifer's first appearance was by far the most engaging. Why is that, you might wonder? Because Yugi's victory against Merrick's mind-controlled servant strings is probably my favorite victory in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. In a show, game, and, well, art form that often relies on constantly increasing power levels to achieve victory, I found this win so refreshing. Yugi uses the only other built-in victory condition in the game to defeat a seemingly invincible monster, and he does it by using his opponent's own cards against him. It was such a brilliant end to a brilliant duel that I could make an entire video on that subject alone. Yugi's epic and strategic victory wouldn't have been possible without the seemingly immortal Revival Jam special summoning itself from the graveyard in a never-ending loop. Unfortunately, the real-world Revival Jam doesn't have quite the same broken effect as its anime counterpart, but that's usually how it goes. Revival Jam is a level 4 water aqua monster with 1500 attack and 500 defense. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 1000 life points. Special summon it in face-up defense position during your next turn's standby phase. Flavor-wise, this appears to be a reference to the idea that a slime is hard to kill by battle since it can easily just reform itself. Magic already has a keyword ability that works a little differently but can still be applied here. Revival Jam is an ooze that can be summoned for 2 generic and 2 blue mana. It has 4 power and 2 toughness, and you can regenerate it by paying 3 life. Yugi also owes his victory to another card in Merrick's Slifer buffing combo, Card of Safe Return. This continuous spell lets you draw a card every time a monster is special summoned from your graveyard. In the show, it was 3 cards, hence the 3 cards in the artwork. I think Konami is just afraid of duelists having the full power of anime on their side. For its Magic the Gathering iteration, Card of Safe Return would be an enchantment costing 2 generic and 2 black. Each time one or more creatures is returned to the battlefield from your graveyard, draw a card. I wanted to make sure cards like Haunting Voyage didn't trigger a bunch of free bonus card draws off an already powerful effect. Blue mana here, black mana there, how about some red cards for a change? Burn cards have been common across both games since the early years to varying degrees of success as the respective metas have shifted. Cards like Chain Strike and Spell Shattering Arrow can burn your opponent for potentially thousands of life points in a single turn, while the OG burn spell in Magic is Lightning Bolt, which deals 3 damage to a creature or player for just 1 red mana. However, not all burn cards are created equally, as you can see with a card like Sparks. This dud of a spell was released back in 2002 and it definitely shows. This card was bad even among contemporaries like Hinotama and Final Flame, which did up to triple the damage of this card and still weren't very good. Sparks is so infamous that in some Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games you actually get an achievement for winning a duel using its incredibly minuscule effect. So how do we make it equally bad in Magic the Gathering? Well, by making it a strictly worse version of Lightning Bolt, of course. For 1 red mana, you can cast the sorcery Sparks, which deals 1 damage only to your opponent. Like its Yu-Gi-Oh! Version, winning with this card would actually be a flex. Everybody likes to make fun of Sparks for being such a bad card, so let's adapt an actually good spell card from Legend of Blue Eyes that's been celebrated in the anime and the actual game since day one. Monster Reborn is a spell card that simply reads, target one monster in either graveyard, special summon it. The glowing ankh of this card's artwork, or whatever this glowing talisman thingy is in the TCG art, suggests this rebirth is a much more benevolent one than something like Call of the Haunted. As such, I think it's only fitting to make Monster Reborn a sorcery costing 1 generic and 2 white mana. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is full of dark-aligned monsters and spells, so much so that even non-dark monsters sometimes have a rather sinister appearance. For example, Man-Eater Bug is an Earth attribute insect, a 2-star flip effect monster that destroys one monster on the field when it's flipped face up. This monster was a staple in early Yu-Gi-Oh! For its potent destruction effect only costing a single normal set. When a simple bug with 600 defense can destroy the likes of Blue Eyes White Dragon, it's no wonder it helped shape the meta at the time. Man-Eater Bug is just an insect, giving it close ties to nature's green mana, but there's also an underlying malevolence that I think skews it toward black mana as well. And for an ability that powerful, it can't be nearly as cheap in Magic either. The creature version of Man-Eater Bug would cost 1 generic and 1 green to summon a 1/2 insect with Deathtouch. However, it also has Morph. You may cast this card face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 generic mana. Turn it face up anytime for its morph cost of 1 black and 1 green. When Man-Eater Bug is turned face up, destroy target creature. Is giving it a morph ability split between 2 mana colors enough to balance this card, or would this be busted? I'm having a hard time predicting everyone's reaction to this one. But you know who's good at predicting things? Big Eye. This dark fiend with 1200 attack and 1000 defense is another flip effect monster. When it's flipped face up, look at up to 5 cards from the top of your deck, then place them on the top of the deck in any order. I think you can probably see where this one's going. Because of the nature of this effect, I think it would be more appropriate for Big Eye to be a blue creature. Fiend is sort of a catch-all monster type in Yu-Gi-Oh! For all sorts of weirdos and oddballs in addition to genuine demons, but Magic has a much more fitting type. Big Eye would be a homunculus costing 1 generic and 3 blue mana to summon. It would have 3 power, 3 toughness, and instead of morph, it would have an ETB. When Big Eye enters the battlefield, scry 5. Thoughts? Too costly? Just right? Or would this Ocular Oracle be forbidden in certain formats for being too powerful? If that phrasing seemed a bit off, it's because I needed a segue to our final card of the video, a certain forbidden one that I neglected to cover last time. Exodia the Forbidden One is a level 3 dark spellcaster with 1000 attack and defense. Its effect reads, if you have right leg of the Forbidden One, left leg of the Forbidden One, right arm of the Forbidden One, and left arm of the Forbidden One, in addition to this card in your hand, you win the duel. Magic the Gathering is no stranger to instant win cards. In fact, to date, there are 37 such cards in the game. However, these cards usually require highly specific circumstances to grant you the victory. Battle of Wits needs you to have over 200 cards left in your library, Hellkite Tyrant needs you to control 20 or more artifacts, and 20-toed Toad needs 20 +1/+1 counters plus 20 cards in your hand. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Also has some convoluted instant win conditions itself. That's what makes Exodia so famous both in and out of the fandom. All that he requires is for you to draw the right cards. In Magic, Exodia the Forbidden One would cost 2 generic, 1 white, and 1 black for a 3/3 wizard avatar. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may reveal your hand. If you do, you win the game if you own cards named Exodia the Forbidden One, right leg of the Forbidden One, left leg of the Forbidden One, right arm of the Forbidden One, and left arm of the Forbidden One in your hand. I'd love to hear how you'd break this card down in the comments, or if you have better ideas for how to adapt any of today's cards. I had a lot of fun making these videos, and people seem to like the first one. If you're still watching, would you rather see another random assortment of cards for the next video with some old and new ones mixed together? Or would you prefer I adapted an anime character's entire deck? Let's say what Yugi's Duelist Kingdom deck would look like translated into Magic cards. If this video gets 300 likes, I'll do another random assortment video, and if it gets 100 comments, I'll start adapting some anime decks. Let your voice be heard below, and please subscribe for more Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh content. Thanks for watching.